I am obsessed in thinking about the opportunity deficit. I found myself in 2008 in the South Bronx on a daily basis working on an education program that was designed to help a population of kids who otherwise had no hope. They were suffering from an enormous opportunity deficit. Growing up in a small town in Virginia, I never imagined that I would end up in a place like the South Bronx. But me and my best friend Nick, what we wanted to do was develop a program that might give certain opportunities to kids who otherwise would never have them. A 20% high school graduation rate. 20% of that population would then go to college. It amazes me that in the wealthiest city in the world, part of that city is representative of the poorest congressional district in the country. Now, I was also spending my time not just in the South Bronx, but at one of the largest and most international media companies in the world. A company that reached 3.5 billion people with their various media products, but they wanted to do good. They were funding a school in the South Bronx called Eagle Academy for Young Men. Now, this company, which again wanted to do good here in the city with which it is based, was trying to help provide and combat the opportunity deficit that existed for this population of kids. Now, how do you address that? How do you help this population achieve something that they will never be able to normally achieve without graduating from high school, without graduating from college? So we developed a business program. It was to teach them the basics of entrepreneurship. How do you start a company? You don't have to have a degree to be able to start a company. Some of the most successful business executives in the world never graduated from college. Why would these kids be any different? So we convinced this very large global company to help fund us and support us in developing this program in the South Bronx at Eagle Academy for Young Men. But we faced insurmountable challenges in being able to develop this program. But it might not have been the things that you imagined it would be. Confidence is everything. How do you instill confidence in a population of kids who know nothing other than the street that they live on and the environment with which they exist? How do you also instill confidence in middle management at a Fortune 50 company? Very difficult. We developed this program, and we were hopeful it would be successful, but we faced two very significant challenges. The school itself advised us that the only way to attract these kids was to, in fact, give them presents. If we didn't give them presents, they weren't going to show up to learn about business. Going back to the company on 6th Avenue, the guy who championed our cause got demoted, and the person who replaced him didn't have enough confidence to continue to support our program because it wasn't their own. So the program failed. We spent a lot of time focusing on our successes, but I wanted to start in something where I failed. The program failed. Fast forward, I was working as an intern, still for News Corporation, and they developed something called the Wall Street Journal CEO Council. It was working on this that I all of a sudden realized the power that could happen when you bring a group of influencers together in one space at one time to talk about an array of issues: education, healthcare, national security, the spread of extremism, youth unemployment. When you bring a small group together, a small group of influencers together, it's amazing what these people could do. I formed a group called Concordia. Again, starting it with my best friend Nick, we didn't want to create a think tank or an institute or something that would research things. We wanted to be conveners. We wanted to bring a group of influencers together in one space at one time, in an environment conducive to partnership. How could you build something taking the experience the entrepreneurial spirit and the creativity of the private sector and bring to it the scale of the public sector. Going back to college, me and Nick, we both went to school in DC. And I was on Facebook one day and saw an ad for this thing called the Hilltop Auction. And I saw on it you could buy lunch with a president. I'd never met a president before, but I was intrigued to meet a president. So I went to the auction, and up came an opportunity to have lunch with this man. His name is Alexander Kwaśniewski, and he was president of Poland. I bought the lunch for $75. I think the lunch itself cost more than that. They also had on it a lunch with this guy, Jose Maria Aznar. He was president of Spain. That sounded pretty cool. $75 was a pretty good deal. I think I bought this one for $60. So Nick and I go to these two lunches, and we forge a friendship with two people who had run governments, run countries. And we learned about what was happening in the world, the changing global economy, and how we, as a society, needed to change our approach to these issues. Collaborative governance, public-private partnerships. So therefore, we began to think, convening leaders. What did we learn from the Wall Street Journal CEO Council? What did we learn from these two great men, brilliant leaders? One had brought his country into NATO. The other protected his country during a time of violent extremism. So we started convening leaders under the auspices of building partnerships. We formed Concordia. Concordia is the Roman goddess of understanding. We thought the name made a lot of sense, bringing together an unlikely cast of characters, all with remarkably influential positions, to think about how they could have impact, how they could address an issue. We went around, we built a plan, just like any entrepreneur. We wrote it out. And we went and pitched it to everyone we had ever met. And everyone said it was a bad idea. Everyone said it would be a mistake. Everyone said, there's Davos. There's Clinton Global Initiative. Who needs you? So we went back to the drawing board and we said, we're going to have an event. We have no idea whether 5 people are going to show up or 500 people are going to show up, but we're going to have an event. We built the theme around partnerships against extremism. What is the role that the private sector could play in combating extremism? In college, we'd witnessed the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, but what about youth unemployment? What about this opportunity deficit that this population of people were feeling? What drove this violence? So we announced a date, September 20th, 2011. 9 days after the 10th anniversary of 9/11, the theme, partnerships against extremism. How do you address this issue? What we wanted to do was teach the private sector how the public sector operates and thinks. We invited a bunch of different people, and we thought it'd be really interesting to ask George W. Bush his thoughts on this subject. So we invited him. I was at a baseball game 3 weeks before September 20th, 2011, and I got a call from a woman named Anita McBride. And she said, I have some interesting news for you. George W. Bush is in Toronto in the morning, and he has to be in Georgia in the evening. But if we can figure out a way to get him to New York, he wants to come to your conference. He wants to talk about the role of the private sector in combating extremism. He wants to talk about what he did right, but more importantly, what he did wrong. So we invited 100 people, begged, really, to come to a half-day conference. We weren't asking for their money, we just wanted their time. So we hosted them. They gave us their time. We're nonpartisan, so we had to think about the political balance of this. It was pretty controversial to host, really, the first forum after George W. Bush's presidency that would really talk about the fight against extremism and his work on the war on terror. So the next year, we expanded. There was this tool, public-private partnerships. It had become a little bit of a trend in Washington. But what was it really? So we thought we'd invite Bill Clinton. And he came. He wrapped up his annual meeting of Clinton Global Initiative, and he came down the street and came to our forum. And he talked about the role that public-private partnerships would play in public policy around the world, that if governments looked at businesses differently and businesses looked at governments differently, what could potentially happen? As we continued to grow and convene people, we started to build a reputation. Could you change the world with this concept of public-private partnerships? But convening was one thing. How do you get this population of people to then do something? As we continued to grow, we got really good at conferences. We got really good at convening people. But what comes next? Partnerships are vital to generating a virtuous cycle, was what Vice President Joe Biden said at our 5th annual summit. We agreed, but how do we, a small team, build partnerships off of this convening? We tested formats. Take a group, presidents, CEOs of SMEs, some of the most creative non-governmental organization leaders. Bring them together around one table. Make them all feel equal. What do you talk about? Where do you go from there? We started to build a bully pulpit. We started to build a platform where you could raise awareness. It was that platform that led to the Secretary General of OAS. He chose that platform to make his first public comments about the Maduro government in Venezuela and the crisis that was happening there. Come to Concordia 2016, which we just finished last night. We talked about a wide array of issues, but here's what I was most excited about is we could convene all of these fascinating people, but where was it going? What was it going to do? So we started thinking about a partnership model. How do we create these partnerships? Continuing to grow, I laugh at that first summit where we begged 100 people to come. In this one, we had 2,400 coming and talking about all of these different issues. We still got criticized. It's too broad. You're not going to be able to impact anything. We talked a lot yesterday about the refugee crisis, but not just what governments are responsible to do, but what is the role that business should have in this space? What is the power that business could have in addressing these issues? From this, partnerships have been formed. I want to end with one of my favorite quotes from a German philosopher. Whatever you can do, or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now. If you really want to focus on what you don't have, just start doing. Thank you.